When people who help animals found this huge street cat, they thought they understood what his life had been like. But what came next at the animal shelter surprised everyone, and it was about to change one sad woman's world completely. Clancy had been walking around near someone's home, looking for scraps of food and somewhere safe to sleep. His orange fur had bare spots from old injuries he'd gotten while living outside, and his green eyes always looked deeply sad. But it was his soft, strange meow, scratchy, squeaky, and full of character, that made him different. When the woman who lived in the house first heard his meow, she was shocked. She had never heard any cat make noises like that. When she brought the cat to show her husband, they started laughing that he almost seemed like he was really talking. This wasn't just some homeless cat. This was a cat with a unique voice. A cat that seemed like he was trying to tell them something important, and soon he would. The big, sweet cat's amazing gift was about to be found out. The caring woman started leaving food and fresh water for him, and Clancy found a small covered area to sleep near their home. The woman saw that Clancy didn't want to go away, and it broke her heart thinking about what his life must have been like. Clancy was a cat who had lived almost his whole life roaming the streets, covered in scars, made strong by the rough outdoors, but somehow still kind at heart. The orange giant with his big round face had gone through more pain than most animals ever would, making it through the dangerous city streets of eastern Oregon for almost 7 years. No one knew if he had ever lived in a real house or felt love from someone who cared about him. Life had been mean to him. His body had marks from many battles with other homeless cats, and he was exhausted from always having to survive outside. But even with all these troubles, there was something wonderful about Clancy that made people stop, look twice, and feel happy. In a world where stray and wild animals were usually overlooked, Clancy's playful, chubby face made people feel warmth toward him right away, just like the woman who had seen him. The cat looked so grateful for the safe spot he had found with her and her husband. The woman knew she had to do everything she could to help Clancy find a real home. She started calling local animal shelters, but she got the same sad news every time. All the shelters were already packed, and since Clancy had always lived on the streets, finding someone to take him would be really hard. They just didn't have room for a cat who might need to stay there a long time and would need lots of help and teaching to learn how to live in a house with people. There was also always the fear that Clancy's years on the streets might have made him too wild to train. But the woman and her husband had seen for themselves how calm and loving he could be. However, no matter how hard she tried to convince different shelters, no one would agree to take him in. One morning, the kind stranger who had been leaving food for Clancy saw that he wasn't feeling good. His fur looked less shiny than before, and his body looked weaker and more fragile. Clancy usually loved to rub his head against people when he saw them, but that day he barely had enough strength to stand up. It was heartbreaking to see the gentle giant looking so pitiful. Clancy needed medical help right away. The stranger wrapped him gently in a blanket and took him to a small local rescue center, one of the few places they hadn't called yet. The shelter wasn't fancy, just a small place without many resources that could only give him temporary care. But it was somewhere Clancy could rest safely. However, with Clancy's growing medical needs, this small rescue simply couldn't pay for the extensive treatment he needed. The shelter workers immediately fell in love with the giant talking cat, but they knew he needed much more care and attention than their small, overcrowded shelter could give. They did medical tests to check Clancy's health and were surprised by what they found. Clancy tested positive for feline immunodeficiency virus, also called FIV, which is common in outdoor cats who have lived in tough conditions and gotten into many fights. Also, his body showed signs of damage that told the story of years spent surviving on the streets. His old scars were everywhere, some rough and jagged, others faded, covering his orange fur like a map of his hard life. His teeth were in terrible condition because of bad nutrition and no dental care. Many were rotten and causing him terrible pain every time he tried to eat. He also had a bladder infection that had probably gone untreated for months, adding even more suffering to his daily life. Even with all these health problems, Clancy had stayed a gentle giant. It was clear that this poor cat had never known any life except the streets. But despite all his medical issues, Clancy was different from any street cat the shelter had ever seen. Cats who had lived their whole lives outside, truly wild cats, were usually nervous and scared of humans. They were completely independent, having learned to depend only on themselves to stay alive. Many had never experienced human kindness and didn't know how to respond to it. Clancy was completely different. Even though his beaten-up body told the story of his harsh life, he was affectionate and warm. He wanted attention from people and would even look for it. Every time a shelter worker came near his cage, his eyes would light up and he would rush over, hoping for pets and affection. Clancy was a complete mystery. It seemed like even though the streets had been his home for so many years, Clancy had never given up hope that someday someone would take care of him. Now that he had a safe place, that loving part of him was becoming even stronger. The shelter staff started noticing the same special thing about him that the woman who had been feeding him noticed. His meow sounded almost like human words and brought joy to everyone who worked there. But there was a serious problem. With all of Clancy's medical needs, the small shelter simply couldn't afford to take care of him properly. The shelter knew that animal shelters all across Oregon were struggling with too many animals and not enough money, but they were determined to find this cat the help he deserved. They believed that eventually Clancy would make someone a wonderful pet, but first he needed proper medical treatment. They contacted the cat adoption team, known as CAT in Sherwood, Oregon, and hoped desperately that this organization would be able to accept Clancy. Sorry for the interruption. Before we continue with the story, I kindly ask you to like the video and subscribe to this channel. It is very important for us. Thank you very much. When Heather Svoboda, who handles communications and fundraising at CAT, learned about what happened to him, she knew she had to help this sweet cat who could talk come to their center. She was curious to meet this special cat and find out if his meowing really sounded like real words. Soon after, Clancy was brought to CAT, where he finally received the medical help he badly needed. He was fixed, got medicine for his bladder problem, and had emergency dental work to take out the rotten teeth that had been causing him pain every time he ate. After many weeks of medical treatment, Clancy was finally feeling much better. So much better that he began talking even more than he had before. His squeaky and chirping noises became the everyday sounds at the shelter, and the workers loved listening to his odd conversations. By now, every single person there had completely fallen in love with him, and since he was getting healthy again, they really wanted to find him the right family. After so many years living outside, he needed a warm home, a soft bed, and someone who would shower him with love. But even though they all loved Clancy, they knew finding him a home would be hard. Yes, his huge teddy bear body was sweet and cuddly, but he was getting older, and most people wanted to adopt young kittens. Also, having the cat immune system disease meant he would need regular doctor visits and treatment for other sicknesses that this virus could cause, and he would have to live alone inside to stop the virus from spreading to other cats. It was a lot to ask from anyone who might adopt him, but soon Clancy would amaze everyone, and the shelter workers would find a way to make people fall in love with him. One afternoon, while Clancy was checking out his new temporary home, something amazing happened. He was resting in his usual spot, enjoying the warm sunshine through the window, when a volunteer came over to spend time with him. Clancy acted the way he always did, with his funny rough meow. He was always happy to see someone visit his cage and would always respond with a head bump and sometimes even roll over on his back when he wanted his belly rubbed. He purred happily, but then something changed in the sound he was making. His meow became clearer than it had ever been, and the volunteer could have sworn she heard him say one amazing word. From his small mouth came a sound that was just like the word hello. "Did you just say hello?" the volunteer asked in wonder. The volunteer stood perfectly still. This had to be just a coincidence or her imagination. Cats don't really talk, right? But Clancy looked up at her with gentle, loving eyes and meowed again. This time, the sound clearly sounded like the word hello. They had all joked before that Clancy often seemed like he was having real conversations with them. He was definitely a very chatty cat, but this was something totally different. The volunteer laughed and gave the happy giant some extra ear scratches before running off to tell everyone what she had heard. "You guys, Clancy just said hello to me," she announced excitedly to the staff. Word spread quickly around the shelter about the giant talking cat who seemed to speak real human words. This wasn't just his weird, rough meow anymore. Clancy was truly special. Nobody believed the volunteer at first, but then they started recording their talks with the lovable cat, and there was no denying that Clancy seemed to be trying to have real conversations. The shelter had found Clancy's special charm, the thing that would definitely make people more interested in adopting him despite his age and health issues. Nobody would be able to resist this talkative cat. They started posting videos of Clancy talking with the volunteers, and thousands of people watched, amazed by Clancy's loving personality and funny little conversations. Nobody could believe this was a cat who had spent his whole life living on the streets. Among the people who watched the videos was Sandy, a woman from Oregon who had been following Clancy's story since the first post showed up online. Sandy had always loved cats, especially ones that needed extra care and attention. When she saw Clancy's video, her heart jumped with excitement. She knew right away that she had to meet him in person. There was something about the way he made his little chirping sounds, the way his eyes lit up when he talked. It felt like Clancy was speaking directly to her. The shelter had been honest about all the special care this giant cat would need, but none of that scared Sandy. She just knew she could give Clancy everything he needed, a safe place where he would be loved and spoiled for the rest of his life. Sandy called the shelter, and before she knew it, she was driving to meet the orange giant face to face. When she arrived at CAT, her heart was beating fast with excitement. Sandy had always owned cats, but just a few months earlier she had lost her beloved pet to old age. Her house had felt painfully empty ever since, and she was just starting to think about looking for a new companion when Clancy's first video appeared on her screen. It felt like fate. She didn't have any other cats at home, and he needed someone with experience and patience to give him a good life. Sandy felt sure they were meant to find each other. The moment she walked inside the shelter, she could feel the excitement of finally meeting Clancy the talking cat. She just hoped they would connect with each other. Heather led Sandy to the area where Clancy was resting. There he was, the big orange furball lying on his favorite spot, as if he had been waiting just for her. His bright green eyes looked up, and he made a small chirping sound to greet his visitors. Sandy knelt down beside him, gently reaching out her hand, and Clancy, always the perfect gentleman, bumped his head against her with a soft thud, his favorite way to say hello to people. He purred loudly, rubbing his head against her hand, and let out a rough but clearly loving meow. "Hello there, handsome," Sandy said softly. "Are you ready to come home with me?" As Sandy held Clancy in her arms for the first time, she was amazed by how gentle he was. He was bigger than she had expected, with a solid warmth that made him feel like a living comfort blanket. His chubby cheeks were even more adorable in person, and his purring was like a soothing rumble against her chest. She knew without any doubt that this was meant to be her cat. From the moment he first meowed at Sandy, the gentle giant hadn't stopped chatting. It was like he had so many things to tell the woman who might finally give him what he had been searching for his entire life. "I think he likes you," Heather said with a smile. It was clear to everyone watching that these two belonged together, that Clancy had finally found his perfect match. From the instant she had seen Clancy, Sandy knew he would be coming home with her, but feeling him snuggle into her arms made the decision absolutely final. She couldn't imagine leaving without him, never experiencing his affection or his funny little conversations again. She wanted this to become part of her daily life. She was ready to offer Clancy a real home and give him the best life possible. "I'd like to adopt him," Sandy told the staff with tears of joy in her eyes. The adoption paperwork was finished quickly, and soon Clancy was heading to his forever home. Sandy carefully prepared everything: cozy beds throughout the house, easy-to-reach litter boxes, and plenty of toys for the former street cat. But Clancy needed little entertainment. He wanted love above all, and Sandy gave it to him freely. He became the king of the house, following Sandy everywhere while chirping and meowing, as if sharing important secrets. During quiet, sunny moments, he would make those amazing meows that sounded like real words. "Hello, Sandy," he seemed to say during their morning routine, never failing to surprise her. In all her years with cats, Sandy had never met one quite like Clancy. He was truly one of a kind. "You're my special boy, aren't you?" Sandy would tell him every day. Rather than needing time to adjust, Clancy settled in as if he'd always belonged there, as though he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. Sandy felt grateful to be the one chosen to make his dreams finally come true. Did you like this story? If you found Clancy crying outside your door, would you have helped him or just walked away? Tell us what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and click the like button. Remember, love doesn't care about wounds or how old someone is. It just needs a chance to grow. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in our next video. Have a wonderful day.